Hello, welcome back. This is going to be a slightly different episode. In this episode, we will be talking about mind-blowing, mind-warping, mind-boggling concepts. These are simple concepts, you could say, in a word or two, a few words. But these few words hold an enormous amount of information, knowledge, power, wisdom, and mind-warping effects. So, I believe this is probably going to become an ongoing series of sorts with multiple episodes because, well, there's a lot of mind-blowing concepts. So, here's the first of these episodes. In no particular order, we'll be going through these mind-blowing concepts. So the first one is one that most of you probably already know. If you don't live under a rock, you've probably heard of the butterfly effect. So, this is an interesting one. Essentially, it's a simple, easy to understand concept. The idea is that the mere flap of a butterfly's wings on one side of the world could cause as much as a tsunami to occur on the other side of the world. And perhaps this tsunami wouldn't even happen right away or in a day or even in a month. But given enough time, that slight shift of air current could cause a chain of effects that grow over a long period of time into what results as a tsunami. So, that's the butterfly effect. The next concept is one I pondered over for quite a while, and it's called systems. So systems are essentially groups of similar objects that behave in similar ways, interacting with each other, creating the dynamic of the entirety of that collection of similar objects. And that dynamic of the entirety of that collection of similar objects is what's known as the system. So it's a kind of machine, in a way, a very complex machine that just keeps on going, keeps on turning. Lots of inputs, lots of outputs. It's interacting with itself. That's the most important thing. That it's interacting with itself. That's what makes it a system. And systems are really important in game design, which happen to be game design happens to be my field of study in my undergraduate studies. And so we talked about it at length. But it doesn't end there. Because not only can you have a single system, right? In the real world, systems are never just isolated events. Because the real world is interconnected in so many ways. Everything is connected to everything else in some way. And so there's never one single system that works by itself. That's a closed system, in other words. It always has other inputs and outputs, things, other systems, entire other systems that are interacting with this system. So not only can you have one system, but you can have layers of systems. And each system can actually build into a greater system, and that would be the next layer. And this brings in, and I wasn't even going to talk about this, but this brings into mind one of the universal laws that is talked about, I think, in Hermeticism, and maybe in other places. I feel like it's well known. It's talked about in a lot of places, and I don't quite know the origin of it. But the law says, as above, so below. And this can be applied to the idea of layers of systems. As above, the system above shares a lot of qualities with the system below, and same with the system below, of course. Reciprocates. It shares a lot of the same qualities that the system above shares. So the system that is above, like more the grander system, the larger scale system, that comes from the lower level system, is not entirely the governor of it. Of course not. It is also governed by it. But that's the same for the lower system too. So to ground this in an example, you can think of the system of people, right, of humans. We are governed by a lower system called quantum mechanics. This system of quantum mechanics, which we still don't entirely understand, has some part to play in the outcome of the dynamics of the system of humanity, how we interact with each other and with the world. That's a larger system. So systems get so complicated. But that's just the lower end, right? That's the makeup of our system, humanity's system. The makeup is quantum mechanics, as far as we understand it today. But then the larger system, the grander system that affects us, is, of course, the system of our sun, the solar system. Right? Because our solar system, the way that the planets move around the sun, that's a whole system. There's rules and dynamics that govern how all that works. And we happen to live on one of those planets. So, of course, the grander system, known as the solar system, hence the name, the grander system has an effect on us. And of course it does, because the sun, without the sun's generous light rays that it shares to the world, we would not have photosynthesis going on. So we would not have plants, and we would not have oxygen to breathe. We would not have plants to eat. We would not have animals to also eat, because animals eat the plants, and then we eat the animals. So there you go, systems. And of course those are just two examples of systems There are, of course, tons of systems in between us, humanity, and the solar system, right? Like the system of the weather, right? That's just one example. Okay, so that's systems. But one crazy idea that piggybacks off of the idea of systems and also embellishes it is this idea called emergent behavior. So what is emergent behavior? Emergent behavior is where the saying, the sum of something's parts always becomes greater than what it is. That did not land right. What is the right way to say that? Well, you know what I'm trying to say. The entirety of what something is, it's not just the sum of its parts. It's greater than the sum of its parts. So that's what emergent behavior is talking about. So one example of this that they gave in my systems class in my undergrad studies, one example is flocking behavior. So flocks of birds, or a school of fish, both move almost as though they are one entity. So I don't know how they do that, but each individual somehow can see where the rest of the crowd is going. I don't know what's controlling the greater object of the flock itself. What's actually controlling the flock itself? Because it's not any one of the birds, or in this example of the school of fish, it's not any one of the fish. They're almost deciding it all together, but not any one of them is deciding it. So there you go. That's a perfect example of that flock is greater than the sum of its parts. Or that group, that school of fish, is greater than the sum of its parts. And why do they do this? Well, we think they do this because they appear as though they are a larger entity. And so they can, I think, scare away some predators, at least in the example for the school of fish. And I think somehow they also, it's just harder to, catch one individually because they move away from it somehow. I don't know how they do that. It's mad. But there you go. So that's emergence. Emergence is wild. So you get a group of things going. Again, it's just a system. So a system begins, and the interactions of that system can create emergent behavior. So each part of the system is contributing to the whole of the system, and then the whole of the system interacts in ways that none of the individual parts are doing in and of themselves. Basically, the affordances, the qualities of action of each individual part of a system are entirely not the same as the qualities and affordances of action of the grander system itself. The grander system behaves fundamentally differently from the sum of its parts. That is what emergence is. And to me, that is just a wild. It's just like you don't know. You don't know how a group of similar things interacting together is going to turn out. You just don't know until you basically see it, unless you're like God, unless you're like, poof, like cracked. So emergence behavior, it's so cool because it's so novel. You just don't know what it's going to look like. Until you see it. Then, of course, it becomes, more predictable. We kind of know how a group of fish moves. We kind of know how a flock of birds moves, But before that ever happened, right? If you just saw one bird flapping, you never would have guessed that they would form that sort of airplane V shape that they form, You wouldn't guess that. You wouldn't guess that. All right, so I'll mention one more, and then we're out of time. And I have so many more to cover, so definitely stay tuned. Do this again. So the last one I'll talk about is one near and dear to me. It's called conceptual blending. So what is conceptual blending? Well, basically, it is what it sounds like. You take a concept, take another concept, and you just blend them together. So, but why is this so cool? Why is this mind-blowing? Well, I feel like typically, in life, it's just exactly set up to be the opposite of conceptual blending in a way. Like we're told, okay, this is what you do in this scenario. This is okay when this is not okay. Yada, yada, yada. Follow this sort of pathway to success. Here's the labyrinth you gotta go through to do things correctly, to do things the right way, right? But conceptual blending throws all this out the window, because conceptual blending is like, hey, I don't really care about following guidelines or anything, because I am just genius at work. I am just fabricating magical creation, magical ideas just instantly, because I can take two unrelated ideas and combine them and see what happens. It's like magic. And in fact, it is used in a form of magic, not magic with a C, but magic with a CK, or even some people do it just magic with a K, maybe, I think. But I think it's magic with a CK. So MAGICK. So in that form of magic, which is the form that, the Kabbalah use, and many other schools of magic. This is real magic. This is not, parlor tricks. So in this real school of magic, they use conceptual blending when employing the use of divination, specifically tarot. So if you're familiar with tarot, you'll know that each tarot card has different symbols on it and a different character on it. We're going to get to that stuff because that's also something I'm really interested in. It's the archetypes of the tarot deck and symbolism and beyond. But in any case, so we have a card here. So this card has a bunch of associations of meaning. For example, you could have the Fool. So the Fool is a picture of a jester type, or just sort of a bumbling fool type. And yeah, there's a bunch of associations with the Fool. He's just starting his journey. He doesn't know what's coming next, but it's a fresh start, yada, yada. And so what you do in tarot is you have all these different spaces, and these are where you put the cards down when you're giving someone a reading. And each space has a different meaning to it. So this is, I think, called, it's the cross. The one I'm thinking of specifically, it's the cross. The format that I'm thinking of. But there's tons of formats, so it doesn't really matter. But the point is that each location for where you're going to put a card down has a different meaning. For example, one could mean the self. Like, this is you. This represents you. Whatever card lands here is going to represent your energies. And then the next spot is going to be like, okay, this represents the challenge you're going through right now. Something like that. Or it could be, this represents your past. And then the next one could be like, okay, here's your solution. Here's your future. And then maybe the one on top could be like, here's some friends you have. Here's some things that are going to help you out along the way. And then the thing, on bottom here, this could be like, here's what you don't know, what you're not expecting, the unexpected negative trait that you have, or the unconscious thing that is blocking your way, something like that. So then when you have the tarot deck and then you put these cards face down on each of these spaces, that is conceptual blending, because you're taking the symbols of the card, which have nothing to do with those things. They have nothing to do with the self, your challenge, the solution, or the future, yada, yada, yada. Completely different meanings. So you take these completely unrelated meanings and you just smash them onto these meanings. That is conceptual blending, and together they create a new meaning. New meaning is formed. And that is the magic of divination in a nutshell. So, I think that's enough for now. And I look forward to speaking more about these mind-blowing concepts and deep topics. All right. Peace, blessings, light, love, magic, cosmos, universe.